2020 has been a big year for gaming and esports. That's obvious when you consider the fact video game makers Activision and Take-Two Interactive are both up north of 30% on the year. But it's not just a boost for the video game makers themselves, also a big boost for the video game players. And as Soledad O'Brien highlights in a new episode for HBO's Real Sports with Bryant Gumbel, more and more teens are capitalizing on the video game craze to become multi-millionaire video game players as well. Take a look.
Teenage boys are dominating the sport of gaming, and a new kind of star has been born, one making very big bucks at a very young age.
How much money did you win?
$3 million.
So joining us now is Soledad O'Brien. And Soledad, thanks again for coming on here. I mean, it's something we've been talking about for a while. There's big opportunities out there in the video game space. But what have you seen maybe as the biggest surprise as it continues to grow here in 2020?
Yeah, I think one of the bigger surprises is that somebody, by the time they're 20 years old, is kind of aged out of competition, especially in a video game like Fortnite, which is the most popular in the world. And what they've been able to do is to allow 13-year-olds to compete, right? So the age has dropped significantly. At that particular event where you heard Kyle say that he won $3 million, 7 teenagers became millionaires overnight. And so I think there's a move away from this idea of, gaming is a waste of time or a way to kill time to actually, if you're good enough to compete and win money, or if you're entertaining enough to compete well enough and also stream and build an audience, which allows you to get subscribers and sponsors and get money, it really becomes a path to a very viable business.
Yeah, and it's one of those things too. Obviously, when we're dealing with teenagers, we got to bring on the parents aspect of this too, because a lot of parents out there watching might say, look, I don't want my kids playing video games because that's a waste of time.
Not a single parent I talked to said that. You know what they say? Really? They say, I loved video games as a kid, and my kid has been playing video games since he or she was 4 years old. And remember, the generation that started with video games now, it's been out for long enough that those people now have teenage kids. And they actually love video games. So it's very different than when I was a kid, right? And my parents would say, no, that's a waste of your time. Don't do it. These are middle-aged people with teenagers who love video games and want to see their own kids play them. They compete against their kids. They get walloped by their kids. And they very much, I think they're concerned a little bit about the swatting and some of the weirder aspects of the entire sort of culture. But in terms of spending time, it really is, this is a business, this is a career, this is a job, and my child is good enough to actually be successful in it.
Yeah, it's a big shift. I mean, we've seen it play out in the high school level too. I mean, there are teams now, scholarships that are being offered for a lot of gamers out there. But in terms of actually capitalizing on, I guess, the upside, it's not necessarily just people who win the tournaments, but also Twitch streamers, a totally different side of the business as well. So what are you seeing in terms of how there still needs to be that aspect of entrepreneurship here to really see the upside? And for that to happen as a teenager seems pretty tough too.
Yeah, no, they really get it. I think they fully understand kind of what they're going into, although I think there are challenges, right? Losing an audience is devastating for anybody, but losing that audience when you're 13 years old or 14 years old or 16 years old, I think can be really, really problematic. But you're right. The entrepreneurship for the folks who are on Twitch, and Twitch, as you pointed out, just like video gaming companies, also up something like 35%, right, in the pandemic. So no big surprise there. But I think what you see is that there's this entrepreneurship in how to be an entertainer. And for young people, I mean, just look at TikTok. They love that. They understand that gaming is about having a personality. If you're not going to win big money, which is one category, you are competitive and you win. The other category is you're pretty good, you're entertaining, and people want to watch you and they want to support you. And one of the young men we interview in this piece, he's making $400,000 a year, which is far more than his parents make. He actually lives in my town where I grew up, and he is homeschooled and basically sits in his bedroom and works roughly 8 hours a day. And his work is video gaming.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think about exactly what you're describing there, but it is work, and I think that's the big point here. Whether you look at TikTok influencers, everybody on Instagram, video gamers, I mean, it is still work. So when you talk to these teens, Does it come across as them looking at it that way, or is it still, kids going to be kids? This is just what I do for fun.
Yeah, it's work. I think they take it very seriously. And also, it's the kind of work where you have to innovate all the time. It's not like, hey, I have a job at the local Hannaford's and I stock shelves and I go in and I come home. It's like you have to try to beat everybody else in being interesting and being creative and being innovative. So I do think that's a tremendous amount of pressure. One of the dads said, listen, I wanted my kid to get a job at a grocery store. I told him, he doesn't have to work at a grocery store anymore. And now that he's won $3 million, I feel pretty good that, or I think he was the one making $400,000. He's making $400,000 a year. He does not need to spend his time at the grocery store, which we would all say builds character for a teenager. He actually can do what he's very passionate about, understanding that is a full-time job.
Yeah, I have a cousin who is very much in the same spot, working in a grocery store, looking to play video games, might be doing it professionally very soon. But when we think about some of those risks you did mention here, because parents might be watching and saying, look, I'm not sure if I want to, put my teenager in a position where he might have to face, or she might have to face these pressures. What were some of those maybe downsides that you did see in covering the story too?
Yeah, and I don't think it works like that. Like, I think what happens is the teenagers get very, very good, right? And then the parents sort of realize that they're winning competitions and they're making money. And that, I very rarely, having had 4 teenagers myself, like they don't come to you and say, here's my proposal for gaming. It's more like one day you discover, wow, you're good at this. But clearly all the parents we spoke to had experiences with swatting, right? Which is that a competitor will call the local police department and have them engage their SWAT team because they've said some kind of fabrication, that there's something dangerous happening, someone's going to hurt somebody. The SWAT team comes out, and the goal for the person who's called the SWAT team, and this could be someone around the globe, the goal is to, while that person is streaming, that you get to see the SWAT team burst into their house. That has happened to almost every single person I've interviewed who does gaming at a serious level, right? So that's obviously a huge risk. And the parents talked about how they dealt with that problem, which was clearly terrifying. And then also, I think there's a real risk it is about building an audience, building a following. It's got a lot of kid actor to it. Like, what happens when you're not popular anymore? What happens when you're not sleeping? What happens with your future? Most of the people that I talk to, they're not thinking college. They're thinking, I make a lot of money. I'm going to do this till I'm 20, and then I'll retire and maybe figure out what I want to do next. Maybe that's not such a bad thing.
Yeah, no, just fascinating stuff, and totally different world than some of the hobbies some of us knew as teens too. I think there's not as much upside, certainly, if you're not top in the fields of recorder or piano or some of these other things that parents encourage their kids to get into. But fascinating stuff. Soledad O'Brien, appreciate you coming on. You can check that out on HBO Real Sports. Thanks again for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
Hey investors, Zack Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.